Hello, everybody. Welcome to another unboxing, a fresh episode of The Good, The Bad and The Rugby. I hope you're keeping well. My name is Alex Payne. Tins is back this week. Very nice to see you. And we have moved the dial a notch or two this week. Very much still rugby, just a different code, as we welcome a true legend of league. I'm not quite sure whether I can get away with that or not, but I'm going to go with it anyway. The only captain to have led the team to 3 consecutive Super League titles at Leeds, now director of rugby, the highest point scorer in Super League history. Welcome to the man known as Sir Kev. How are you?
Very, very well, thank you. Thanks for that kind introduction.
What's it like stepping across? Well, I say the dark side. We are the good, the bad, and the rugby. We don't actually have a classify whether we're Yornian or league, but it's very nice to have you on. How have you been?
Very, very well, actually. Very well. I think you're forgetting my short stint in rugby union, aren't you?
Well, I was going to come on to
7 months.
Where do you put that in your CV nowadays? Is that right up at the top, or do you kind of leave that just as a little sort of asterisk?
No, I'm proud of it. I really am proud of it. I think at the time, I was ready for a different challenge. Sort of knew that retirement was not too far away, and I'd not been in a different dressing room since I was 16, so didn't really know what real life was going to be like for me. So to play a different sport professionally, to be thrust into a different changing rooms and everything that comes with it was brilliant. And some of the guys I met were unbelievable. I loved my time.
Good.
I loved my time.
What was it like?
Good.
What was it like pulling the strings? Did you find you had more time, or was there less time? I'm always intrigued because we always say that when we watch rugby league, obviously it's high paced, but it's sort of predictable on how you go. And then it's if there's a line break or an offload, then it's flood that. Whereas obviously there's a lot more tempo changes in rugby. It can go really slow, but then as soon as you get over the game line, it can pick up. How did you find that pulling the strings at 10?
Yeah, it took a lot of getting used to, and I don't think I ever quite cracked it. But I would say I really struggled in the slower games, just for any momentum, and actually, I don't mind admitting this, got cold.
Yeah.
Because we're back to winter rugby and stood around a fair bit and in ankle deep mud again. We weren't Premiership, we were Championship, so the grounds were a little bit different. And but actually, the drier days we played Bristol a couple of times, and in those games, it was fast paced, really, really enjoyable.
When was the last time either of you got cold in a game of rugby? I mean, was that something that ever happened in league?
Only ever sort of now and again they'd start the season late January, and so before my stint in rugby union, it'd probably be going back to a season opener. We played the Celtic Crusaders. I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah.
They set up in North Wales. That's where Gareth Thomas played a couple of seasons, or 18 months anyway, and we played there in the snow, the opening round of a Super League season, and that was pretty cold.
Right.
But nothing like Moseley away.
Moseley
puts hairs on the chest.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Did you ever get cold? Did you ever go blue?
Play 2 games stick out. Played 1 game in Newcastle, and literally at half time, everyone put jumpers underneath their shirts. It was unbelievably cold, and afterwards, I remember everyone sat in the changing room drinking coffee, and literally it was like shaking everywhere. No one could keep it in the cup, and then. That was going dodgy if I said couldn't keep it in. And then the other time was at Gloucester, and the pitch was freezing. So the ref did a check, and the pitch was definitely freezing over as we went. And we were playing a French team, and we were like, let's play this because there's no chance this French team want to turn up. And then 5 minutes in, Dave Atwood stood on one Frenchie's head and split him right open, and then they were fired up and they beat us at home. So yeah, we should have possibly got that one called off too. But it was minus 20 with the wind chill, apparently, that day. Yeah. I don't know how you go from like -2 actual temperature to minus 20 with the wind chill. I don't know how that works, but if someone can explain that to me, please tell me on Twitter or something. Yeah.
Kev, it's very, very nice to have you on. And I definitely want to come back to the union bits and bobs, but there's certainly quite a lot to talk about before we get into that. And one of the things that I definitely want to start with, as I say, we'll come on to 2 northern boys who apparently only grew up 40 miles apart, which is quite.
How are you, Kev?
It looks like. Yeah, where were you?
I'm Oldham. Or
yeah.
from Oldham, say Saddleworth. You'll know that from having mixed with the Fords, won't you?
Yeah.
They'll say Saddleworth, but normal folks say Oldham.
Yeah. So I was just other side at Penn. I was on a Otley.
Right. Oh, nice spot up there.
Well, you'll know. Obviously, the Otley run a few times, maybe, Kev.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few times.
What I'd say at this point is that Tim's paper round looked considerably harder than yours. Anyway, we'll come on to that. What I do want to start with, though, is the astonishing and inspirational feat that you put together before Christmas to raise money for the Motor Neurone Disease Association. 7 marathons in 7 days to support the great man, your old mate, Rob Burrow. I think you were setting out to do 77777, so 77 grand, 777 quid. Do you know how much you've got to at this point?
Yeah, I do actually. I do. It's around 2.7 million.
Right. It's a fairly good return on investment, I would say.
Yeah. Can you fix it at 2777 until it goes to 37?
Well, it'd be nice. Do you know what? It was brilliant. The whole thing was, it's the best thing I've ever done in my life. I know Tins has done a number of challenges now, but to get the support we got, to be able to do something for a mate who is hit some pretty hard times, to be able to be back in a team. There were 6 of us, and to have that banter every single day, to have that challenge every morning, to then try and turn yourself around and get yourself ready to go again was, I look back with real fond memories. I'll do it again tomorrow.
What were the legs like? That because I've done like multiple back-to-back day cycling, but running for me, if I run 5K, my hips and everything hurt. How painful was it every morning getting up, and was it getting a hot bath before you even thought about getting out there and running again, or what? Because you smashed times as well, didn't you?
I had a pretty stringent recovery plan, which it didn't set out that way at first, but I found that it worked after a couple of days, and I think it was day 3. I'd not had any sleep, so when I was getting in bed on a night, my body was just overheating, and sort of ran day 3 really angry and frustrated and tired, and that's when we got our quickest time, which anybody who runs a lot knows that when you run angry, you run really well, but I lost sight of what it were about, and I sort of, at the end of that day, I thought, right, well, I'm just going to have to accept I don't get any sleep for the rest of this, and actually when I did that, I started to get a little bit. But in terms of my legs, I prepared. When we decided to do it, it was about 6 weeks before day 1. And a good mate of mine had a go at the Brathay 10 in 10. Yeah. So I picked his brains a little bit and said, what do you reckon here? I'm 6 weeks out. And he said, well, you need to do a 3 in 3. And I looked at him and I thought, you're mad, I'm not doing 3 in 3. But I slept on it a couple of nights and give that a bash, which was sort of around the end of October, early November. And it was horrendous. And day 2 on that, Tins sort of setting out, world of pain, thinking, what am I doing? It was gale force winds here, rain was coming down, it was middle of the afternoon. I'm thinking, what are you doing? Anyway, I got through that, and I suppose having got through it, and then we turned up for 7 in 7 and having a cause, and so much momentum, and that just went through the roof. There was only a couple of days where I didn't feel great. And it were a case of, well, we've got that much behind us now. We're just going to get it done. Yeah. So,
what was extraordinary about it is it wasn't just 7 in 7, but they were rapid time.
Yeah, they're all under 4 hours, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, we knew. I think a lot of people have done different challenges, and the team we put together thought we're mad when I first said we've got to put a time limit on it, because if we don't, most people could go out and walk a marathon, and then a good percentage of that could go out and walk another one the day after. So we actually thought, well, let's put a time on it. Now my quickest is 3:13. So we actually worked it out, and I said to them, we're going to get them all in under 4 hours, and they thought we're crazy, but we did it. And that was trying to be, we probably weren't as disciplined as we should have been, especially the first 3 days. And then when I'd ran angry day 3, and I think it were a 3:34, it were like, right, let's take stock here because we've got another 4 to do. Let's just be a bit smart with how we go about this. And
what was the celebration like after the 7th? Or did you go to bed for the week?
No, we couldn't have one because we were in tier 4.
God, yeah.
And that was before we went back into sort of a lockdown again. So we're still waiting to have that celebratory drink, the six of us, to get together and actually, enjoy being back together. So it was pretty short-lived. It was, anybody who saw some of the footage that were put together, you heard a lot of talking about using the toilet and eating bacon butties and having a brew. But that's what it was at the end. It was a bacon butty and a brew and a mince pie, and right, that's it. It was like a real lull. We're like, we've cracked this, we've done it. We've done something brilliant for a mate. We've raised a load of money and awareness for the M&D Association, and this M&D community, this army were behind us. But that were it. We went home. And I was in a regulatory meeting that afternoon. It was like, just done 7 marathons, and that's where we were. That were life.
I always think Moses Kiptanui talks about bacon butty and a brew whenever he was breaking records or whatever it was. I mean, talk us through the reality of what it became, because I mean, it was front page news, and you talk about the army that got behind you. I think everybody is clinging on to good news stories at the moment, and obviously it's set out because Rob is just handling it so incredibly well in the situation he's in, and has become inspirational, as a figurehead of what he's going through. But did you have any idea of the scale and the noise and the money that was going to come in behind you?
No. And even now, just you saying that, I've got goosebumps, because if you'd have said to me, you wouldn't have got 1% of what you did, but you'd have hit your target financially, which was all the 77,777, I'd have snapped your hand off. Honestly, I wouldn't. And when we set out, sort of day one, we were at 40 grand. And that was a couple of big sponsors, big club sponsors had put 27 in. So we'd got 13 grand from pulling around different friends and pots of money from families. But then by the end of day one, we hit our target, and we took great comfort from that. And it was like, well, let's try and enjoy this now, because we've hit our target. And we just couldn't believe the well wishes, every day, the text messages. Our media manager at the club, Phil Daly, did a wonderful job with getting us in every newspaper, on every sort of TV channel as well. And sort of the well wishes were brilliant. People came out to see us. People were beeping their horns in the morning when they saw us. We couldn't have ever imagined. And I think a lot of my career when I was a player was about timing, and I feel so fortunate that in a lot of occasions I was in the right place at the right time. But certainly for doing this 7 in 7, you throw in COVID, you throw our Super League season had just finished when you'd had that remarkable grand final, and a lot of people were in tier 4 and looking for some sort of inspiration, and they'd certainly taken it from Rob and his story, and the BBC had done a wonderful job with Rob. So, we just rode that wave, I suppose. I
always think that rugby's a special game, because it's when you hit those hard times, or you see players hit the lows that they don't want. The rallying of the community. Our example would be Doddie, exact example, and you throw a dinner on, and immediately we raised 650 grand at the first dinner that we did, that was put on within a short period of time. And I do think that's what makes rugby quite special, and it's great that it was the same with all the leagues and league players and fans. They've all, whatever we can do to help, sort of thing.
I just think the response from the union public as well, just almost uniting the codes. And I know a lot of traditionalists don't want to do that and don't want to pull the games together, and I understand all that, and having played both, I'm massively respectful of both. But actually, the people are very similar. And within 2 days of Rob being diagnosed, within 2 days of his announcement, we were sat in front of Doddie Weir up in Carlisle. Now, that wouldn't have happened if rugby wasn't what it is. And we talk about my little stint in rugby union. Without that little stint in rugby union and playing under Brian Redpath, I don't think that friendship would have been there. And then for him to hook us up with Doddie, that wouldn't have happened. So Doddie's been truly inspirational for everybody. But for Rob, he's been a shining light for him. He's absolutely led the way. He's been so positive for him that how can you not have, when Doddie is like he is and he's attacked it like he has, how can it not rub off on you? And it certainly has with Rob.
Am I right to say you met Rob, were you 14 and he was 12?
Yep.
You've known each other since then. I'm just fascinated to know the friendship that was there before and the friendship that's there now. I mean, it's an extraordinary bond between the two of you. But what was Rob's reaction to the whole thing? Was it like a knowing nod and you don't need to say anything, or was there? I mean, I imagine there was extraordinary emotion, or was it just a couple of cracks and thanks, pal?
No, he's been so emotional, and I think when I probably have to tell you that about the whole year. But if we could, day 6 in the marathons was the hardest. Yeah. And that was because I think at the finish line on the 5th, we saw Rob. Rob was there to meet us.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Was that was because that was the amazing artwork behind as well?
Yeah, it was. Right? Yeah. So they put the mural in Leeds City Centre, and so I saw Rob. Surprisingly, ran past him, nearly got run over by a bus. And there were different times in these marathons where I just choke up for no reason. I didn't, you obviously emotional about the whole thing, but so when we hit the finish line on day 5. That was, because we were so close then. We had 2 to do. The times were all pretty good. We all, we're feeling in decent condition. We're all pretty happy with how we'd gone. But it was so emotional that day. And I came home that afternoon and my wife said to me, "You look shattered." And we'd had no sleep. And so day 6 was really, really difficult. But if you think about how sort of Rob's been the full 12, 13, 14 months it's been now. So he very, very quickly came to terms with it. He's been so brave and courageous. The meeting with Doddie was wonderful so early on. We can't thank him enough for that, for the time he gave, and he drove to Carlisle to meet us, and he was wonderful. And Rob was ultra positive from the start. But for us as a group of players, a group of past players, that sort of core group, and there'd be, I'd probably say there's about 8 or 9, but much wider than that. It probably ripples to about 50 or 60 players that I've played alongside Rob. But that core group sort of got together pretty quickly and said, right, if you were in his boots or his shoes, the first thing that matters is family. And so how do we make sure that his family looked after and he doesn't have to concern himself with anything beyond actually just making sure he enjoys his time with them and is able to fight this with a clear mind. So when we sort of did we'd done a number of things earlier on, the testimonial game, which you may remember that were on Sky, and Sky did a wonderful job with it. Jamie Jones, who's done 20 years as a player, shared that with him, which was unbelievable, to play in front of the 20,000 again at Headingley at sort of 39-year-old again and have the old clan back together was brilliant, although I didn't play for long, a bit too old.
Like the Expendables in many ways.
Yeah, group of old men getting back together. But that was wonderful. And then there was a big dinner where, Will came, Kenny Logan came up, just Gareth Southgate were there, just a wonderful turnout of UK sportsmen, the Brownlee brothers, just Tracy Neville, just some wonderful people across the UK who supported it. And then COVID hit, so things stalled. And there was a number of little things bubbling away, but we all had in our mind that we'd hit this magic number by Christmas. And I think there were a couple of things that went on sort of late October, early November, different fundraising. Jamie Peacock did his ultramarathon. Keith Senior and Barry Mack did 3 Peaks Challenge twice in 24 hours. And ours was just an extension of that. But to be able to, at every opportunity he's got, he said to me, "Do it for me." And when it boils down to it, that's what mates do, and I know he would. I know he'd have done it for any of us, so we're just trying to be mates.
That's amazing. And, I'm sort of reiterating that the world needs good news stories right now, and the way that you have all pulled together for him has been remarkable. How is Rob now? I mean, what is his focus at the moment, and how? Because what we love to try and do on this is to help where we can. How can we mobilise? Admittedly union fans, but there will be a lot of people who will listen to this and say, I want to get involved. Are there new campaigns? What's the next? Yeah,
well, I think there's a number of different things going on. I think whether you support Doddie,
is that Rob's view on this? It's just whatever you can do for the cause.
Yeah,
get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, it's probably a bit deeper than that. Making sure Rob's name is at the forefront of everybody's thinking, especially whilst it's difficult at the minute. being back in lockdown, although he's not classified as vulnerable, people with MND are as close as you can get to being vulnerable and should be on that list. So still in contact with him. Phone calls are obviously difficult, so it's text messages, and he's getting bombarded left, right and centre with text messages and bits and pieces, and he's trying to live his life with his kids. And but he's good. He's been so courageous throughout this and so inspirational. The sport love him. He has, when you saw his performances as a player, he defied logic, being the size he was and how quick he was. But to play a sport where, ordinarily you need to be at least 6 foot, he killed it. And now to see his courage and his fight and his spirit is, everything that we want to see, don't we? Everything.
Yeah, it backs him up as a player, because obviously from Leeds, and when I came down to Bath, Jim Fallon was playing down there, and I used to watch Jim Fallon playing on the wing at Leeds, and I still watched a lot of league, and I know Danny Kerr's a massive Leeds fan as well, and Rob was always. I loved watching Rob because he's one of those players that everyone wants to write off because of his size, but it just proves that rugby is a sport that if you're smart enough and obviously quick enough and you can get out of the way, you can still tear people. You can make people look like an idiot. You can make people fall over. It can make people miss, but still had the heart and the soul to chop people down, do his work that he needed to do on defensively. And I think what you see from that is when you finish, and he's obviously got hit with what he's hit, but everyone still respects and knows that sort of heart and soul, and now you're just seeing it on the other side when he's been dealt a hard, a tough set of cards, that he's still going to go at it the same way he did with his rugby, and I think that's what everyone respects about it.
Yeah, agree 100%.
Do you, Kev? Because I imagine I'd love to know sort of almost Doddie and Rob's view on this, that when you get propelled into this position of sort of inspiration, etc., it's probably harder and harder to actually have the moments where you just want to say, fuck it, this is really unfair. And I just wonder whether you as a group, whether Rob has that outlet where he can say, bugger it, as opposed to constantly having to stick, the smile on and pretend that everything's all right. Do you know what I mean? I just wonder whether he has got the outlet that inevitably everybody will want to have.
Yeah, I think you try and provide that opportunity for him to have that, and that's all we can do as mates. I haven't seen it. He's been ultra positive. I've not seen him. No, I've seen him get upset on a couple of occasions. I've seen him get emotional, and a lot of that is based around his family and close friends and talking about the future and what it looks like. But you can understand, if you're in that position, it certainly made me emotional. I think it made most people emotional. So, but I think the fact that he's been prepared he's certainly gone there, but he has not shared that with us. He's just got on with it. He's been so brave, and like we all would have, there'd be things going on in his mind that he's considering, but he's so courageous and so tough, and I'd probably say the same with Doddie. I've never seen him. The time I've spent with him, and it's not a great amount of time, but we've become decent friends and swap text messages and speak to him regularly. There's never been any of that from Doddie either. It's a case of I've got what I've got, and I'm going to show people how to deal with it, and I'm going to provide help and support and hope for thousands and millions of others who are going to have to face this throughout their lives.
They are stronger men both than I could ever hope to be. I mean, Tins, you've done a lot for Doddie over the course of, I suppose the journey that he's been on. Where the hell does he find his strength from? He was a huge character and as a player and as a pundit in the media. For everything he went to, there was a pair of large tartan trews attached to him in some capacity.
Some horrendous dress sense.
But he just carried that baton on into this fight and almost got stronger as a personality through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's very similar to Rob in terms of, he was. You think back to great. I mean, obviously, you being a presenter, you think back to great sort of that 97 Lions video that Living with the Lions, the first original, sort of sitting behind, and he's the life and soul of it. And that's what you get with Doddie. And I think, he's not going to let this disease take that away from him. He was still doing hosting gigs for Scottish Rugby, and I did a few things with him up there. And his thing was he was still about to make people laugh and have a pint. And he's, in terms of what time they gave him, he's well surpassed anything that they ever expected. But that's just, that's Doddie in a way. We know quite a few people who have dealt tough cards. If you look at Hambo, and it's about, you make a choice. You make a choice to either let it affect you, let it get you down, you go into your shell, you back away, you don't want to sit, or you wear it and you wear it proudly and you go, but it's not going to define me. I'm going to stand out, and it's, and I'm going to show what my personality is all about and who I am, and I'm not going to let a disease take control of that and lessen what I am. And I think it takes a better man than I. I don't know whether I could do what any of these guys do in terms of how they've faced up to it. But I think they're inspirational, all of them, and I think it comes from how they've been throughout their life. And I think if you can be that inspirational leader on the field when you're playing, and then you get this, I think it's just automatic that they've switched into that. And fair play to them.
I suppose I want to talk about you, Sir Kev, because there is so much to talk about. But I suppose just a final question. I mean, your relationship with Rob is, and the output of what you've done from it is extraordinary. But I mean, in some ways, do you sort of see yourself as the elder brother because of the relationship that you've been and the time that you've had? Am I right in saying you used to sit next to each other in the changing room for years and years? I just sort of wonder how, I know it's not about you, but how this process is for someone who has done so much for a mate who's having a really rough time of it. I mean, do you have your own outlets in order to be able to compartmentalize, deal with everything that you are doing for your friend?
Yeah, I think, you're giving me a lot of credit here, but there were 5 other guys who did the 7 in 7, and then over the last 12 months, that sort of core group we have, have really come together and have stood strong for each other. So, that interaction between us all, sort of, you can go, Tindall know this, when you're playing good sides and you win things, you can go weeks and months, even years without seeing some of them. But the minute you're back in each other's company, the minute somebody needs anything, there's the twinkle again in your eye, and you just know that if that Batman call goes out, you answer it because they do it for you. And there's certainly an outlet for us because we get to. It gives us, selfishly, gives us an opportunity to get back together and spend time together. And it's in the worst possible circumstances. Don't get me wrong, you wouldn't, you'd change it tomorrow if you could. But actually, for us to get together and be able to show a mate how much we care and love and respect him is brilliant. So I do have, just finishing up on Doddie before we move on, I have to say I was a little bit disappointed with him because during the 7 in 7, he texted me the night before the first one. And he said to me, Kev, as part of your challenge, I'm going to drink 7 pints of Guinness every day for the next 7 days. Right. But he only did the first day.
Oh.
Can you believe that?
We'll have a word. We will have a word. We'll have a word with him.
Very unlike him as well.
He'll be very disappointed for being outed. He'll probably do another set. If he did do 7 each day, he'll send a video out for the next 7 days.
That is a challenge we can all get behind. Good on you. It's you've done a remarkable thing, all of you, I know, and we will stick whatever links we can across all our social channels to make sure that people are aware and will get involved in supporting Rob, and send him a huge squeeze from all of us. I hope I hope there is some big smiles and some happy times to come for him. In terms of you though, I mean, you talk about getting the band back. Am I right? Are you sitting on the floor at the moment?
I am, yeah.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah. Because I normally do me sort of Zoom me type stuff in my kitchen, but the kids are in there, and when I got the email earlier, it said I needed to be in a nice, quiet, serene room, so I'm in my living room.
You're doing a good job. I wondered if it was some sort of yoga, where I was trying to go with this.
I imagine
you need 40 hours of stretching a week in order to walk.
I imagine if he's in the splits and he's just sat there comfortably like Jean-Claude Van Damme. He gets up and he'll do a dance and shake it off in a minute.
Yeah,
between 2 chairs. How are you physically these days after just a remarkable career? What hurts? What doesn't hurt? Did you get away with it, or are you suffering?
No, I got away with it. Massively got away with it. I think when I look at some of my former teammates with busted knees and hips, shoulders, I think I got away with it. So my biggest complaints are my thumbs. I dislocated both thumbs, so when it's cold, they don't work like they should, but I can cope with that. And then, obviously, my face took a fair hammering.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
This can help you on that.
Fractured cheekbone, eye socket, nose a couple of times, numerous cuts. But that's, I don't need my face to run and keep fit, do I? So, I can't complain, really.
Why did you get away with it, where others didn't?
Some of it's a position I played. But I played for 19 seasons. I think some of that was trying to look after myself, the prep. I didn't drink a lot when I was playing. I don't drink a lot now, but certainly didn't when I was playing. Always tried to have a decent diet. Always tried to make sure I'd done everything I could before we played from a prep point of view, and then afterwards just tried to recover the best I could. Probably what helped get me through the 7-7, really, being able to draw on some of my experiences and some of the learnings from being a player. So I certainly got lucky, and then I'll probably say this a million times during this podcast, but it's just so fortunate as well. And we had some really difficult moments, like everybody does in sport, but actually the timing for a number of things was just right, and perhaps I was just one of the lucky ones.
Yeah. Did you get away with it, Tins? Where would you classify yourself on that Richter scale?
No, I think I pretty much, I would say I got away with it as well. My face took most of it. I've actually got a sore shoulder, but I dislocated it skiing. Rugby, and I think I'm on my back, and that's about it. My back, but I wouldn't say it's bad. It doesn't give me pain every day. It gives me pain every now and again, but I don't think there's any rugby player who walks away without getting a stiff back. So no, I would say I got away with it as well, really, which I'm very fortunate considering.
You were going to pick up on something though.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. Now, because I did sort of 17 in rugby union, but I started at 18. I was just wondering, 16 is you got your first game at 16. It was what? Because I was trying to think what my emotion was when I was 18. I was on my 19th birthday. I got my first start for Gloucester, for Bath. So I was just trying to think what I'd have been like at 16. Do you remember the emotions of that or not?
Yes, yeah, mix really. Because I think at that age you don't really have any fear.
But you'd been playing with some big names in that Leeds team then as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so Barry McDermott, Franny Cummins, Anthony Farrell. I'm trying to think who else would have been in. Gary Mercer, who obviously coached for a decent amount of time in rugby union. Who's a great fella. So just some of my heroes were in that side. Sadly missed out. Ellery had left a couple of years below, which I'd have loved to have played alongside Ellery Hanley.
What a boy he was.
Yeah,
he came and coached at Bath.
Yeah,
I mean that guy's an operator.
Yeah,
tell you.
Yeah, lovely fella.
Lovely fella. I'm just laughing here because as you named some of the people you were playing with at 16, I was just praying for my balls to drop, and I mean I cannot imagine what it must have been like. I mean, how the hell do you get your head round going to work in that environment? I mean, obviously you were a man child, but I mean that is a hell of a thing to take on at 16.
Yeah, it is looking back now. At the time, I'm the youngest of 3 children, so I've got an older brother who's 3.5 years older, who's made sure I was streetwise. We shared a bedroom till I was 15, so I knew everything that were going on, and I probably spent a lot of my time playing in age groups that were above and 2 years above, especially at school.
Yeah.
So I was used to being around older kids. But then, the call came out of the blue. I'd only been playing against men for 5 weeks, played 5 reserve games and got thrown in. So I missed the day. I got called into training, which was the day I was getting my GCSE results. So I couldn't collect them. My mum and dad went for them.
How did you get on?
Yeah, I did all right. And then
the brains and the brawn.
No, I don't know about that, but I did all right, and sort of got home that day, and I was playing the following night, and my mates were going out for a drink, and I'm thinking, well, just got my GCSE results, I've done all right, and sort of missed out on some of that, and then played the following night, which I didn't get long. We were about 15 minutes at the end. We got beat at the end against Sheffield Eagles, but one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I was 16, and actually I knew I had some talent, and I knew we had a great opportunity, but just getting a small taste of it that young just showed me that I was miles off. If I wanted to stay at that level and play against blokes every week, I had to change. My mentality had to change. My training had to change. I had to not reinvent myself, but completely transform how I went about my business, because you needed to be able to survive, and I wouldn't have survived being as I was at that stage.
But you were quite hot property at a very young age, weren't you? Am I right in thinking that you first game you played in boots that were 2 sizes too big, stuffed with newspaper or something like that?
Yeah.
But I just sort of, even that aside, that it wasn't a surprise that you were fast tracked. Is that fair?
It's probably a bit unfair for me to say. I don't know. I think what happened.
Listen, we work with Hask. We're very comfortable with people, giving a little bit more of themselves than the media handbook would otherwise allow.
Yeah, I think what happened around that time, certainly in Lancashire. So I'm an Oldham boy, and we play all our rugby in Wigan, St Helens, Warrington, Leigh, Widnes, Oldham, Rochdale. So you sort of hotbed of rugby league towns this side of the Pennines. And Wigan signed a 12-year-old lad who was a mate of mine, who I played representative stuff with. And from that moment, every professional club in Lancashire signed everything that could catch a rugby ball. And this all started from 11s upwards. And now, I was 12 at the time as well, and courted a number of different offers, but chose to go over the Pennines to Leeds, and I signed there at 13. So, and what comes with being in that sort of professional environment at 13 was you get dipped into training with some unbelievable players very, very early, and you learn quickly, and you get developed a lot better. And that helped me along a hell of a lot. And then you're probably lucky, because during that 97 team, when I came in and made my debut, Leeds were struggling. Leeds didn't have a great side. They had some good players, but they didn't have a great side. They were mid-table. If it had been at a Wigan or a St Helens who were challenging, or a Bradford at that stage, you were challenging up near the top, you probably wouldn't have got a sniff for a couple of years. So another thing, was just really fortunate about timing and right place, right time.
So was that why you went to Leeds? Because, again, am I right in saying that Wigan were actually very interested in you, Warrington likewise? I mean, why did you end up with the Rhinos?
Yeah, really, I was very, very close to signing for Wigan. In fact, the Wigan was on his way back from a camping holiday or caravanning holiday in France. So he missed a phone call, but
so you rang to say
no. They'd called, and it was too late. This had been going on 18 months. Alex sorted the calls. My mum and dad used to field calls every Sunday night from different clubs, and they'd be on the phone for an hour, and could sort of see the stress it was causing my parents. And we made the decision not to sign until I was 15, 16, and just to hang fire. But
was it a bit like a sort of northern version of Jerry Maguire? That's what I'm kind of seeing here. Do you know the scene where the prodigy gets the
cush
through the door?
He's saying Sinfield was the cush.
No, I think this was going on in a lot of households across the northwest at the time. This was because they just went for as many young kids as they could.
Yeah.
But my mum and dad, we walked in those gates at Headingley. I know Tins has been there and played there a number of times, but we walked in the old gates that were at Headingley, and my mum and dad just fell in love with the place and said, "This is right for you." You know, you're away from all that Lancashire and Northwest politics. At that stage, Yorkshire clubs, they weren't signing a lot of young lads. It was a different philosophy. They were only handpicking 4 or 5 of what they thought were the best at each age. Whereas Lancashire was, there was 24 lads at my age signed at Warrington, and law of averages tell you that not all you're going to get through. Yeah. They're just not.
I was going to say, what was going back to what was training like back then? Because going back to when I joining Bath in '97 was probably pretty similar in terms of names that you're walking into that club. I think there was 35 internationals at Bath. It was a ridiculous squad. They just won the Heineken. Actually, we won the Heineken Cup the first year I was there, but it was still Thursday night, first versus seconds, full ball, full goo. Whoever's left standing gets to picked on the weekend. Was that ever like that in league, or has it been slightly more professional than rugby was?
Their brain cells.
Yeah, no, thankfully it was slightly more professional. There's still a lot of hitting bags and being out in the mud for hours on end hitting bags, but because the first team were full time, they sort of had a much more science-based approach to what they did. Whereas on an evening you had your reserves and your academy coming. So again, it was replicated a lot of what the first team did, but without the science, without any of the GPS and the monitoring systems that were in place. So the first team was, very, very professional at that stage. Although, having said that, there were certainly some areas that needed tightening up. If we look, they're probably the 1%ers now, or slightly more than 1%. But back then, diet was pretty much disregarded. There was a little bit of an helping hand, but nobody really bothered what you were eating or drinking. And
that was one of the biggest things I noticed when we went up and we did the England training up at Leeds. When we did that, it was we were still lifting shed loads of weights. We were in the gym all the time, and all you boys were doing body weight stuff, power. It was mainly body weight stuff, and you weren't hitting each other. You never went full goo on the pitch. I know it's a different game, but then on Tuesdays we're still up there, and you're doing all your skill stuff with small size ball picks up, and we're just going forwards on forwards, full go, and you're like, this actually looks more fun than what we're doing. There's something I think obviously you've developed over being a professional scope a lot longer. I think it's something that ultimately rugby's got to learn from, because I think we talk about this in terms of what's going on concussion wise, but you've been smart enough not to do it. You only go full go in the game, really, don't you? You don't do it during the week. You don't leave it out in the week.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the philosophy, really. So you do have elements of contact, and I think they're important, but they're all controlled. And then, having been in rugby union for a very short space of time, I can tell you now, I'm glad I were back, because I watched what the big guys were doing, and it was brutal. It was brutal. So to see them scrumming sessions they were doing, and you couldn't pay me a penny to go in. You couldn't pay me £1 million to get in one of those scrums. And what they did to each other was, it was brutal. So,
can I ask you about two gents who were sort of instrumental in, I suppose, the very early part of your career, Eddie Barton and Mick Hoff?
Yeah.
Tell me about the impact that they had on a young Kevin Sinfield.
Yeah, so Mick was, sadly passed away. But he was one of my best mates' dad. And that's what you find, don't you, with team sport and junior sport, that it's normally somebody's mum or dad who takes the team and coaches them. And Mick was a semi-pro player. He played at, I don't know if you remember these sides, some of the listeners will, but Trafford Borough, Mansfield Marksmen, Nottingham City, I think they were called. So semi-pro teams where it was, I suspect he were a bit of cash in hand back then. But Mick was a long distance lorry driver and just a lovely, lovely guy, a really, really hard trainer. Had some brilliant standards and morals and values, and from being 7, he was my coach, and right the way through to being 16, he was absolutely wonderful for us. And when I look back now, and you sort of realise when you're in your early 20s and you're really grateful for what people have done for you. But he used to drive to Aberdeen on a Saturday night and back, and some mornings he'd get back at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then he'd take our team and we'd be over in Lee or Wigan, and 11:30 kick-off, and he'd had no sleep, and just put his heart and soul into it. And just for us, I don't think we could have had a better bloke coaching us. Wonderful man. Like I said, sadly he passed away a number of years ago. But some of my best mates in rugby are from that team, and it were a brilliant time. It was you look back on your sort of childhood playing rugby, and I get asked this quite a bit. If you could play any game again, which would it be? Well, actually, one of them would be one of the cup finals I played in under 13s, because just the best time. It was just like no pressure and fun, and some really good lads. And then Eddie Barton was a school teacher, a former rugby pro himself, played a bit at Oldham and Huddersfield. But he coached our school team, and once again, just a wonderful fella, great teacher. You know what it's like when there's a sports teacher who, really likes your group of mates, and if there's ever any bother, you know which side he's going to be on, and he just really looked out for us, and he was a good fella.
Which is brilliant. I love the story about playing the cup final again at 13. I've never asked you this, Tins, actually. When who would be the people you'd name check from the early days? Was it Otley where you started?
Yeah, well, I never really did club rugby. I also went to Queggs Wakefield, which is quite a good rugby school. I never really got involved with a Sunday at a club. We played on a Saturday at school, and then I didn't want to play on Sunday as well, so I never really joined the club. I did some stuff at Sandal. My dad obviously was captain of Otley back in the day. My uncles played for Otley. My grandfather played for Otley. Nigel Melville's brother Glyn and Nigel played for Otley a lot, sort of around with my dad as well. So yeah, that Otley would have been my club that I went and watched, but I didn't really get involved with club rugby until Bath was the first club I officially joined.
So who would you name check from school or county or whatever it was?
What? That's remember playing with
now in the same way Kevin does.
Well, no. If I look back at school level, I always look back at sort of the coach Jeff Wappett, who was coaching Yorkshire 18s and then England 18s, because I always think without him, I don't think I would have ever got through. He was also coach of Bradford, who was our sort of big rivalry that we had at school, and he liked the way I play. He was a massive physical northerner, and I was quite a big centre compared to everyone else at sort of 18. So he always liked the way I play, and I never sort of got picked for the next journey, and he sort of dragged me through and gave me another opportunity. So without him, whether I'd have got the opportunities that I did, obviously you've got to take them when they're given. But he was sort of, he helped me because he sort of liked the honesty and the work ethic. There were some better talented players. Sort of, you look at someone like Phil Christophers, who made a brief appearance for England back in the day. He was always picked ahead of me. He was always. But then Jeff sort of pulled me through, and actually Tom May, him going away on a study leave thing, gave me two games in the Six Nations, and I sort of never looked back from there, really.
Amazing sliding doors. Kev, I want to ask you about signing that first contract. You were talking about the fact that obviously there was a lot going on with talented kids at your age. Do you remember signing? Did you sign at 16? Did you actually sign the contract at 16, or did you sign?
No, I signed at 13.
13.
Christ, I mean, I'm not sure I was doing joined up writing at that point, but did you? I mean, do you remember that process and the sort of the excitement, the nerves? Was it?
Yeah, I've still got the contract.
Have you really?
Sure. Yeah, I have, yeah, sure. We'd gone up to Edinburgh to visit, and we went back a second time to see Doug Lawton, who was the coach then, the famous Widnes coach. Great player in his own right, played for Great Britain and did some wonderful things in the sport. And at the time, the Challenge Cup was sponsored by Silk Cut. So it was back when tobacco sponsored a lot of things in sport. And we walked into Doug Lawton's office, which is, it doesn't exist anymore, but it ended up being our doctor's room for games. And behind Doug's desk was two shelves completely stacked with Silk Cut. And it was like the guy out the X-Files, just chain smoked through our meeting with me and my dad. And the meeting, it was the strangest thing. He sort of said, how much do you want? And my dad, because you're getting paid at 13, do you know what I mean? It was crazy. And how much do you want? And my dad told him, and he said, well, if I come back he came back with more. He said, if I come back with more, will you sign today? And I was 13 at the time, and I've said no. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, my mum's not here. So he said, right, well, if I can get the board to agree to it today, I think it were a bit of a bluff about the board, but he said, if I can get the board to agree to it today, I'll come to your house tomorrow and we'll sign it. And the following day, he came to our house back in Oldham, and in front of me and my dad, we signed the contract.
Amazing.
I'm fascinated to know how many zeros were on that. I'm not going to ask, but that, I mean, at 13, could you bought a Ferrari kind of thing, or were you just dealing with bigger sweets in the sweet shop?
Oh no, you're into the thousands. You're into the thousands, and what it did, it gave you a great start in life. But I'm from a working class family in Oldham, and proud of it. But my mum and dad didn't let me touch a penny. I think the first thing I can remember, the first thing I bought, and it had been my 15th birthday, and I bought a pair of grey Nike Air Max. I don't know if you can remember. You remember them? And that was it. It was the only thing I used my contract money for, because my mum and dad said it's going away. We're going to invest it, and the best thing they ever did for me.
If I'd known that, I might have gone to league a bit earlier.
It's different now, Tins. You know that.
Yeah, it's probably flipped around a bit.
I mean, genuine question, because there's several things. Were you ever tempted by Union? Because Union was obviously 2 years professional, and actually, fun enough, when Union went professional, there was a lot of money sloshing about, and then it kind of cut back again. Were you ever courted, spoken to, interested, or was it just never a thing?
No, I was certainly back at the end of 2002.
Yeah.
We went to Frank Cotton's place over in Sale, and had a meeting with Clive, long time ago, and it was on the back of sort of England Rugby Union started to make some inquiries. They'd signed Jason Robertson had gone across. There's a bit of talk about Gary Connolly, who went over for a short stint. Robbie Paul went over for a short stint. Chris Redlinski. I think there was some brief talks about
Henry Paul was across there, wasn't he?
Yeah, brief chat with Faz at that stage. I know Faz went later on. So there were a number of conversations that were taking place with leaguers, and I met Clive, was really interested, but at the timing was just wrong. I was 21, 22, not won anything in league, wanted to play international rugby, wanted to play in a Challenge Cup final, wanted to win the Super League. So all these sort of things, do you want to leave a sport when you've got so many things you want to achieve? And I was young, and I don't regret it at all. I love my time playing league. I love my time at Leeds. The year after I got made captain, and I always watched Union. I watched Union more than I watched league, because it was me way of getting away from my own sport, but still trying to learn and pick up. And I was a massive England Rugby Union fan. Loved it when we won the World Cup. I went on the Lions tour a couple of years ago over in New Zealand. I love my Union. So
very interesting. We could have had our own pod, Kevin, if you can. Just imagine. I said at the Pocock the other day. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is sort of coming through at Leeds, what the culture was like. Because I was very lucky to work with Scott Quinnell for a number of years, who told some of the most extraordinary stories about his days at Wigan. And I mean, there were days that turned into nights, that turned into weeks, that turned into months in those stories. But it sort of sounds like that wasn't as much of a thing, certainly for you or for Leeds. Or did the game progress quite quickly in terms of that, obviously getting paid, but quite an amateur ethos, into your era, which was very much about looking after yourself and making sure that you were always ready to give your best?
Yeah, it did change, and I was probably right at the start of the transition, certainly at Leeds, and I think what probably helped us shift it, because it needed to be shifted. If we were ever going to win trophies, we had to change the mentality and the attitude towards how we went about what we did. But to see a very, I don't want to say a heavy drink culture, but it was there. People went for a couple of pints after. There's still a Monday club and a Thursday club and all those different things that old teams, when you hear about them wonderful stories and from years gone by, they still existed. And people thought a good diet after, when they were full time, was stopping at a local garage and a pre-packed sandwich in a Mars bar and a can of lilt. So it was very, very different. But for us, a club, sort of 96, the club nearly got relegated. 97, I made my debut. 98 was a really successful year for the club. They got a wonderful Australian coach called Graham Murray. Won the Challenge Cup that year and had a couple of years of tasting success. Made a grand final that year, but got beat by Wigan. Sorry, it was 99 they won the Challenge Cup. So they had a couple of successful years, but for us to consistently be challenging, we had to change, because if you think we're coming up against a Wigan side who had been professional probably for 10 years, and we might have only been professional 3 or 4 years and still getting to grips with it. St Helens had a great side at the time. Bradford had a great side. For us to change, we had to get away from some of the old, I don't want to say the old guard, but the old guard needed to just shift a little bit, and they did. They were brilliant, and for them, so many of them who were internationals and in their early 30s, it'd have been really easy for them to shrug their shoulders and say, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm not changing." And 1 or 2 were like that, but the vast majority had never won anything and were desperate to win things and were willing to try and change. And we also had a wonderful youth policy at the club. So I think for 12 years on the bounce, our academy team had won the championship and had very few players had transferred into the first team. There'd been a few, but not enough. And sort of our sort of batch, if you like, there was, 5 or 6 who migrated through those teams and were the core of the side in their early 20s. So very fortunate. The number of ingredients were in place for us that helped us change it, and we had to change, otherwise we wouldn't have won anything.
You're going to pick up on that, Tins, or not?
Oh,
compare and contrast.
Yeah, I think I came in just obviously the year after it turned actual professional, and we're going through this whole thing now with, again, keep jumping back to this concussion thing, but obviously there was a period of where it was amateur really, but you were getting paid. At international level, it stepped up very quickly. Obviously, Clive, that was the main thing that Clive did, sort of 98, 99, and then that failure in the 99 World Cup, going out in the quarterfinals. But he'd overtrained us in that, and I think he learned a lot from that. But then going forward through 2001 to 2003, he was streets ahead of everyone else, but that was still streets ahead of what you were doing at your club. But it was filtering down in little bits. But yeah, we were, I would say, quite comfortably saying, 97 till sort of 2001, we did a Super Sunday after every single international. We did we had a midweek game on a Wednesday. You might be then sat on the bench on a Saturday, but you'd still be out on a Wednesday night. You only trained once, so a lot of the time in the first 2 years, you'd finish training, you'd just go to the pub for a lunch, and then you'd end up staying till the pub till it's shut, and then you get up and train at 10, and then you go again. So yeah, it was a slow burner in turning professional. But then what I would say that then from sort of 2004-05, it changed very quickly at club level as well, and now you compare even then to what it is now, you'd think it's two different, completely different sport, but for the better, I think. I still think there's time to enjoy yourself, obviously, but I think it needed to be of that professional, sort of more professional nature.
Do you know what I think it's great? You got to experience both.
Yeah.
I think pretty lucky that I experienced it as well.
Yeah, I think there is a perfect sweet spot in the middle where you get the balance of both, and unfortunately that was when we were having all that success with England, because it allowed you. Clive sort of trusted you because you were getting the results, so no one really cast doubts over you if you were winning, and it was pre-camera phones, it was pre-everything, and you could still go out and no one really judged you at that time, as they didn't in rugby. Whereas now it's a headline sport, so you get, if you're out and about at the wrong times, you will get judged a bit more on it. And I feel very lucky that I did go through that. I also wish I was back in the 70s when you get some of those unbelievable stories where you're on a 6-month tour, and I'd love to have been on that. But I think if you balance it all out, as long as you can find. My worry for the kids now, derogatory. For the guys who are playing now, is that they find a way where they can still have fun, and it's not having to wait until you retire. Now it just seems that it's a lot harder now to enjoy your victories as much as you would like to, without someone judging you for it. And ultimately, sport is about winning and being able to then sort of sit down and enjoy it. Now, it doesn't have to be with a beer or whatever, but some people still like to, and you shouldn't have to be worried about getting judged on it, if you know what I mean.
Kevin, you certainly had plenty of opportunity to celebrate success. I'm looking at 7 grand finals, 3 World Club Challenges, and 2 Challenge Cups. Are you a man for medals? Have you got them? No.
Do you know what?
You melt them down into sort of a ring or a...
No, they're all put away. I don't have any rugby memorabilia out. I have one photograph. Do you know what? The only thing on show from is my marathon medals. And actually, when we finished the 7 in 7, the M&D Association sent me a medal, which I think it says Mission 5000 on it. They did some sort of campaign. Might have been back in October, even September, and they had a load of medals made. And they very kindly sent me one on the back of 7 in 7. But it's probably my proudest, most special bit of kit at the minute. It's something that I'm really proud of it.
But that makes sense, though, isn't it? It's something that you wanted to do rather than you were getting paid to do. It's a weird one, I think. I don't think about the medals or whatever you've won, but I would agree. If you do something special afterwards, you've chosen to do it, so it probably means a little bit more. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then so when you look back on your career, this pieces of we got rings. I think it went very NFL. But to have 7 gold rings is great, but
running out of fingers.
Yeah, most rugby players' fingers you can't get a ring on them, can you? Because they're that bent and crooked. So, it's the friendships and memories. When I talk back earlier about the camaraderie of sort of that group of players, because we played together so long, and you spend that much time with each other. It's just something special that's created, and they're the bits that I look back on now, and you find yourself in moments where you gaze and you cast your mind back and you think, how lucky were we? We're so fortunate.
Was there a lot of chopping and changing with squads back in the day? I don't remember a lot of people changing teams that often in rugby league. Did it happen a lot? I feel that rugby union people swap more than they do at rugby league, but
yeah, not really. I think there was some really, really good sides. There were a great Bradford side and a St Helens side, early sort of 2000, late 90s. We were going to have had a good side all the way through, really. So I think if you get the core of a group right, they tended to stay. Same with our Leeds lads. If you were winning trophies, you could have earned a couple of extra quid somewhere else, but you were happy to stay and just be together. And I don't want to say create history because that sounds a bit corny, but actually you knew that you'd claw it back in some way, and actually going somewhere else for a couple of extra quid probably meant a couple more crisis meetings, probably meant getting dragged in after a bad defeat on a Friday night and losing your Saturdays with your kids. All those things add up, and when you balance it all out, some of it it's just not worth it.
You are, without doubt, one of the great statesmen, not just of league, but of sort of sport in this country. Actually, just out of interest, where did Sir Kev first crop up?
I don't know. It was, I don't know. It was something that it just sort of happened. I don't really know, if I'm honest.
Was it teammates, or was it? I've got visions of a banner at Headingley.
No, I wasn't teammate. Teammates never. I got called a lot worse than that. Don't you worry. No, it was supporters, fans, who and it's really nice. I've seen some of the other nicknames some of the lads have got, so I think I got very, very fortunate. But it just
cropped up.
Yeah.
Mike gave himself the Lord, so you know you can.
That's an absolute lie. But
come
please
on,
don't push that.
spit it out. Where did Lord come from?
Well, so Alex Brown was called the Lord originally because he looked like Lord Brocket.
Right.
And then once I started dating my now wife, they changed that name to the Lord for me.
There was a duel at Kingsholm.
Yeah, well, we both had to walk in with leather gloves and slap each other in the face, and then it was pistols at dawn. Yeah, and I won.
The point of the question I was trying to go to, as one of the great statesmen of rugby league, is all the success that you enjoyed. How do you reflect on your career now? Do you kick back occasionally in the bath with a cigar and think that went all right? I got to where I wanted to, or are you one of those people that is so driven and so in the detail that you're never quite happy with, 55 medals and all the accolades that you got?
Probably somewhere in between the two. I think because of how my league career finished, so the treble in 2015, my final game at Old Trafford with some wonderful players, with some really good teammates, Rob being one of them, which was quite a difficult year for me. I announced I was going to rugby union and found myself out the side pretty quickly. It was my 13th year as captain, and being able to get myself back in the team and go on and did what we did just gave me an unbelievable satisfaction that it enabled me to close the book. And I don't open it very often. I don't go back to it very often. I know it's more sort of the mates, my teammates that I love sharing moments with, but it's more the funny moments in dressing rooms that at daft times when you shouldn't laugh and someone's laughing and someone's messing about, or some of those moments that really matter to me. But and that's what I mean when I say I feel fortunate, just being able to go, yeah, there's bits in my career I'd love to change, that were horrible, that were really low times for me.
Which are the bits now that you were like, I'd Control Alt Delete that if I could?
There'd probably be two. First one would be the semi-final, the World Cup. That last minute, Sean Johnson with those magic feet. That really hurt and hurt for a long, long time. I remember, this might resonate with Tins, but I remember being home and you've been in a camp and you sort of believe that you're going to make the final and possibly win it. Your mindset's completely different. So to bomb out in a semi like we did and find yourself back at home the following day, like it was like the bloke off Lockstock when he loses all that money at the start and he's staggering down them stairs. I was like that all week, and just probably for a couple of months, just took me a long time to be able to give it some perspective. And actually, it's the worst thing that's ever happened in your life. And then, what really helped me was, someone really close to me got a really bad illness, and that gave me a massive perspective and really helped me get out of it quickly. The other one was being left out of a cup final team in 2000. I was a baby, I was 19, and having to handle that really early on, and be a part of it and act for the whole weekend and try and be a good teammate and be part of it when I felt like my guts had been ripped out, they're the two that really stick out. And then there are another 50, 100 of them where you're going, wow, how did that happen? Or how come I was dealt those cards? But it's part of your career. You just so when I look back, of course there's things I'd love to change, but I can't. But actually, when I look at where I started out as that 7-year-old skinny kid from Oldham who actually did all right, just going back to being able to finish on your own terms, to win a treble right at the end when you're about to go and play a different sport, to not have to go back and revisit has been really nice, just to be able to move on. And I've said this a number of times, I get asked it a fair bit, but it's hard trying to compare it to something. But I think probably the best thing to compare it to is Shawshank Redemption. And sort of Andy Dufresne on the rooftop after they've finished tiring the roof, and all the guys are drinking beer and he doesn't have one, and he sat there and he's got that smug grin on his face and he feels free and feels like a normal bloke again. That's what it felt like at the end of 15. And after some of the trophy wins, that's what it felt like. Just to be able to be satisfied for a short amount of time and know that you've done all right.
And some. I love the modesty.
Finishing on a treble is not a bad way to go, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. There are very few people who write their own exit story. And actually, we've spoken to Hask about it in the past. He's really frustrated about the way that it ended for him. So I like that analogy of just job done. I can go now. I do want to ask you about Yorkshire Carnegie, but just before that, I'd love to know about more of you as a player. Were you somebody, particularly on those big games, were you somebody that got nervous? Did you always feel that the big games were your natural environment? Were you, as a leader, were you someone that screamed and rallied, or was just very calm and very quiet? What kind of an animal were you on the big days?
I certainly wasn't a screamer and a shouter. I had it
from this interview, I'll tell you, he was methodical, well prepared, and he didn't need to scream and shout about it. He would just go in under the radar, and he was a fucking operator. That's what I can tell you from this interview.
Quite SAS actually as an analogy. Yeah, I like it.
Exactly. Everything you picked up. Didn't need to scream about it. He's done his homework. He knows exactly what he's doing. He just needs his voice to be in the right place at the right time, and he'll put through those gaps. Be perfect.
Yeah. I think I knew that if I got the best out of those around me, that I could do my job, and they'd make it so easy. And we had some, especially the last couple of years, just some wonderful leaders in the team. So I mentioned it before, Jamie Peacock, but to have someone like that on your side who was a shouter and a screamer and got fired up, but absolutely didn't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Do you know what I mean? He was, when you needed somebody to carry it and you're a yard from your own try line and you're stuck in a corner and they've loaded up and they've all got the baseball bats out and they're getting ready to smash you, and Jamie would carry it as hard as he could every single time. So I knew, throughout my whole career, I weren't blessed physically, but I knew how to get the best out of what I had, and I knew that because of the prep I'd done and how hard I'd trained, and not everybody saw how you trained, but I knew how hard I'd trained, that no matter how hard and tough it got, I wouldn't give in. So we might get beat, but only, I suppose, a bit like Fergie, only because we run out of time. Actually, if we'd have carried on playing, we'd have got you. And that isn't with any arrogance. I just knew how much work I'd put in and how hard I'd worked at my game, and I probably was to my own detriment in my last year as a league player, because we got some great young players coming through, and we play on a Friday night, and I'd absolutely flogged myself Saturday afternoon. And what were I doing? I was just crazy, and I reckon mentally I just absolutely drained a lot of life out of me. But that's just trying to stay ahead, trying to stay in front.
But it's funny that now, if you look back now and know what you know from being a coach, and you wouldn't do it that way. It was like Hask was talking about it the other week, wasn't he? That you overtrain because you think you've got to stay ahead, when actually you probably need to. The way to stay ahead is probably just go through what in your mindset what you need to do, but actually rest your body, and you'd get more out of it on the weekend. It's funny that. Do you feel that you did some of that, overtrained in some ways, over prepared?
Yeah, definitely. But I don't know about over prepared. I think I just got the balance wrong with my conditioning.
Yeah.
Nobody knew.
Sorry, yeah, that's more what I meant.
It was. I'd sit on the rowing machine on a Saturday afternoon and do. I took great pride in the fact that I could do intervals with the shortest amount of recovery, and nobody could get near me. But I played the night before, and it's like trying to sleep after a game. You don't get any sleep, and then you're up early with the kids, and you're doing daddy duty, and then suddenly, I'm in the garage and I'm on the rowing machine, and that's the endorphins it gave me was just unreal. But I was just draining myself. Did
you actually suffer any too bad injuries or not, or were you pretty all right? Because Hask was talking about the risk of injury when you're doing stuff like that, but you actually came through okay.
Yeah, I came through okay. I think I had a period where I had a really sore Achilles and a heel. I had a problem with that. but it was more from the boots I was wearing rather than anything I was doing physically. So, sort of that World Cup I mentioned before, I trained the entire 6 weeks with a split down the back of my boot and being taped on at the back and being jabbed in my heel and sort of your Achilles tendon before every game, which isn't pleasant at all. Just to get through, and then spending weeks on end in flip-flops when it's winter. They're the sort of bits that you do just because you want to be out there and you want to play well. So, but no, I was very lucky after most games. I would certainly the last 2 years I'd flog myself, and if I could change it, I would, but I can't.
Amazing.
Very true.
So a quick reflection on Yorkshire Connie. Why was it a little itch you wanted to scratch? Why did you end up going that late in your career?
Yeah, probably some of what we've just mentioned there. I got to the stage where there were a number of things. Neil Back came up to Leeds and coached for a number of years, and had a really good conversation at the time. Several conversations with him, and it was close to moving across then. And it was always something I wanted to do. I just thought to play a second sport. Big Union fan, big fan of Tins and Johnny Wilkinson and Martin Johnson, all those sort of Will Greenwood, all those greats who was part of that World Cup winning side, and seeing them do what they did. And then probably the big one for me was I lost 5 Challenge Cup finals, got dropped from my first one, and then lost 5 as captain. So that weighed particularly heavy on me. And then so at the back end of 2014, we won one. And at that stage, it was, right, we've got every trophy you can win. What's next? And that's when I started to seriously think about, well, I'm just turning 34. I know I've got a couple of years left. What can I do next? I didn't particularly want to move house. At that stage, at 34, which union club is going to come and sign a Kevin Sinfield? Well, probably not many. Who'd never played the sport, and I'd never played a single game. So I needed somebody who knew about me and what we're about and understood, and those at Yorkshire did. So I didn't, I was moving to the dressing room next door. They were a really good set of lads. I always felt that if we could get up, a season in the Championship would have been brilliant for me, so I could learn and pick it up. But it just didn't turn out that way, and no regrets whatsoever. I think to be in that dressing room and make a load of new mates like I did, I'm very, very grateful for it.
It's interesting when you say that you'd made the decision that it then didn't go very well at the Rhinos. Did you go finally with a sort of pat on the back? We're not going very far, I suppose, or was it quite a contentious decision?
Well, I played there my whole career. I've been there since I was 13. I'd done 19 seasons, so the following year would have been my 20th season and possibly another testimonial. Not that I was searching for one. It was more a realisation of, I suppose, I'm coming towards the end of my career. What do I really want to do? Forget the money, forget the medals. What do I really want to do? And it was something I've always wanted to do. And I wouldn't have wanted to finish playing having not had a go. Just, it scratched an itch. Absolutely, it did. And then an eye to the future. I just finished my masters in sports business. Knew that I'd probably get an opportunity down the track at a league club, and thankfully I did. And I worked with our governing body for a number of years, which I'm grateful for. But other sports, I needed to have if I wanted to be in rugby union, I needed to have an understanding of it. I needed to see what it's like to play the game. How can you be an administrator in a sport when you don't quite? And don't get me wrong, there's so many successful people who've never played sport and been wonderful administrators. But for me, I feel now in my role, it actually helps me because I understand what players are going through. So it gave me an opportunity to go and see the dark side.
And there it is. There is the smile.
I would have loved to have the opportunity, and do a sort of sunny building and jump around and flick over and have a crack at rugby league. Were you ever close to going to league? There was when I was 15, I had a sort of phone call if I wanted to go join St Helens Academy. But clearly, everyone got one of those nowadays. I know we found that on that site.
Tim's after dinner
Not
routine
that
is
special,
ruined.
apparently. And then, in 2001, when there was a lot coming the other way, an agent came up to said, "Would you be interested? They want to steal one back, and because you're from up that way as well, and they think you'd suit. Would you think about doing it?" But I was exactly the same as Kev. I was 21, 21 going 22. I just got into the England team. I was 5 caps in. We'd lost the Six Nations on the other game, but we'd played that autumn series in 2000 where we'd won. It was clearly a special team that we were in at England, and I didn't think I was at the right time to then jeopardise that by jumping back to come forth, and that was the last chat we had about it. But then I did think about it later on, but I would have loved to have done it. I would love to have gone winter, summer, and do it like that, and not had an off season. I think I could have got away with doing that, but Sonny Bill wasn't around. He didn't lead the light, did he? Could have been that trailblazer. Could have been.
But did the two of you? Did you come across each other in your playing days? Because you were nattering away before we started recording about Tim's cutting your finger off.
Yeah, so England Rugby Union came to train with Leeds Rhinos.
Yeah.
2005, I think it was. Andy Robertson had just taken over.
Yeah, it was Andy Robertson, yeah.
Sort of, it was brilliant for us to have such a wonderful team with us, to come and train with us. I mentioned it before because I remember Tins lifting the biggest dumbbells we had at the club, the 60Kers, and I'm thinking, wow, if he's the centre in Rugby Union. But anyway, he sliced his finger, and I remember there being blood all over the gym. So I was just checking in, and that it was him. He was pressed in these 60-kilo dumbbells, which...
Right, but then when Leslie Vinicola came over to us, he had 60s. Then we had to rest 20-kilo plates on him. I mean, talk about a debut. First game over, he scores 5 at Headingley against Leeds.
I was at that game.
Were you?
Yeah.
Just give the ball to Les. That was basically a call. Just give it to Les. He was just having a field day. It was ridiculous.
Amazing. Absolutely fascinating. And give us a quick sort of synopsis now, because what were you doing with the governing body?
Yeah, so I went in as rugby director.
That's right.
We had a brilliant performance director, and whose sort of background was basketball, and I went in to just retired to bring some recent playing knowledge and experience. And I absolutely loved it. Within a couple of months, though, John Roberts, who's is at UK Sport now with the Athletics, went off poorly, and things happened very, very quickly, and he ended up sort of within the space of 6 months overseeing our England team, and sort of ended up overseeing all our England programs, which was brilliant. I loved it, and we went to the 2017 World Cup. And got beaten in the final by Australia, really, really close. I got to work with Wayne Bennett for a number of years, who people have been really harsh over him over here, but just a wonderful bloke. Learned so much off him, loved working with him. Had a really, really good setup, really strong setup. And then sadly, it all got ripped up on the back of the GB tour, sort of end of 2019. So, the change coach, Sean Wayne, came in, and I decided to step down. I was trying to juggle both roles. I was director of rugby at Leeds, just had no time whatsoever. And I felt that it was the right thing for me at the time, and with them going with the new head coach, it was the right decision. So, there's a World Cup this year, or set to be the back end of this year, with for men, women, and wheelchair, and then I really hope England do well in all 3 competitions. The game needs a bit of a boost over here, and if we can do well, it'd be brilliant.
I was going to ask that. How do you feel that the Super League setup is at the moment? And is there still a lot of kids waiting to come into the sport like there was back in your day, or does it need not a facelift, but needs an injection of something to really get the numbers flying back in. How's it doing?
So many sports do, actually.
Yeah, I think Alex is right. I think all sports do. I think especially the last sort of 8 months, that all sports have faced, and I think some sports have been able to function up until a point, but rugby having its contact element with COVID has certainly, from that community, club level and schoolboy rugby, has just not been able to get going really. So there is a concern about numbers, about participation figures when we finally get players back. You know, if you don't feel if rugby's not part of what you do, because it's taken away, you're going to fill your time with something else, and you just hope that enough will come back. And then yeah, you're right. We need something that, is it a defib? Do we need somebody to? The World Cup would do it. A really successful World Cup campaign this year would absolutely give it the lift that it needs. I think you guys saw that in 2003, what it does, and it gets people talking. It creates interest and awareness, and but I think all sports are going to face it over this. When we get out of lockdown and we start up again and we get going, and there's got to be a real push for all sports to get kids playing again. And if that happens, there'll be enough rugby league players. And
in the future, I mean, you mentioned you played union. I mean, we've the direction of traffic for many years was one way from union to league, and I think probably in the last 15 years or so, it's probably come the other way. You think of Andy Farrell, Sean Edwards. I mean, just the list goes on and on. Dave Ellis. Would you ever come? And would you got any interest in sort of a coaching role, or would it only ever be administration? Do you feel comfortable in the suit now? Do you miss the boots?
I don't feel comfortable in a suit. Certainly don't in a tie. Right. Yeah, I don't know. Is the honest answer. I have no real plans. I think what this last 12 months has probably given me more than anything is, I think you've got to really enjoy what you do. And I've seen that firsthand with Rob and how precious life is, and the time that we all have. Being part of the 7 in 7, to be able to provide some hope and help people probably showed me where my future should be, which is trying to help people. And I'm not quite sure how I harness that yet, or what vehicle it is with, but it's certainly trying to help people. And as part of my role now as at the club, it's certainly trying to do that and get the best out of people. But I'm not quite sure what the future holds for me. I think, it's a shame I can't become a charity marathon runner, because the buzz I got from that was as good as anything I've had. So, but if I could have my time again, I spent 8 years studying whilst I played. I did a sports science degree part-time and then a master's. I wish I'd have trained to be a doctor. That's probably the nagging thing, because it'd have been the best of both worlds now. I'd have been helping people, and I don't mind blood and guts. And I know Jamie Roberts was fortunate enough to do it. I'd love to have done something like that.
You're a remarkable man. Yeah. You really are. Tins, I mean, what a privilege.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, it was a joy to watch Kevin when he was playing. It's a joy to be able to sit here and chat with him now. Class runs deep, and he's got plenty of it.
Amazing. Thank you. We have really loved having you on this show, and it's really nice to finish almost where we started, which is, a nod to Rob. And we will do whatever we can to stick links and awareness and, as much as we can to bang the drum for Rob and for Doddie, obviously. And look forward to seeing you back in your running shoes before too long. That is it this week for, I was going to say the good, the bad, and the rugby. Perhaps we should rebrand as the great, bad, and the rugby this week. Thank you to Tins and to the truly inspirational Kevin Sinfield. What a man, what a story, and what an ambassador for Rugby League. Don't forget, you can head to our website for all the latest from the Nords if you're looking for some stats. We've got some merch there as well if you want to get stuck into that. We're going to be back in 7 days' time with another cracker of a guest for you. Until then, be safe, look after yourselves. Thank you, Sir Kev. Thank you, Tins. All yours, Rob Brighton. Bye for now.